Welcome everyone to our free webinar session presented by DynamicPoint and sponsored by Sabre Limited. I'm excited to introduce today's topic, which is processing AP invoices using Microsoft Teams and Office 365. I'm Donna Simonovic, the marketing manager here at Sabre Limited, and our expert presenter today is Mike Marson, Director of Business Development for DynamicPoint. Sabre Limited is an expert in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central ERP implementation and training for the manufacturing industry. DynamicPoint are experts in delivering business apps that provide the greatest level of functionality and flexibility through the utilization of the Office 365 framework. We're estimating that today's webinar will take about 45 minutes of your time. All of our webinars are recorded and loaded to YouTube, so be sure to go to our Sabre Limited YouTube channel and check out more videos and subscribe to our channel so that you receive the notifications when new content is added. Or you can check in the chat window in this webinar for the direct link to subscribe. To ensure the best quality, everyone will be on listen-only mode, but if you do have any questions or comments at any time, go ahead and submit those by clicking on the chat icon and typing your questions in the pop-up chat pane, and we'll answer those at the end of the session. So now I'll hand it over to Mike from DynamicPoint to begin our webinar. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you so much, Donna. I appreciate it. And thank you again to you as well as Sabre for helping or assisting us and allowing us to be here today. So thank you for the opportunity. So as Donna introduced, today we'll be going through AP invoice processing with Office 365. And obviously included within Office 365, one of their more popular products in this day and age is Teams. So we're going to highlight a lot of the Teams capability of how I could use Teams to cover each aspect in the AP invoice processing workflow. So that's our agenda for today. Quick introduction of who you're talking to, right? Who is DynamicPoint and what it is that we do. And DynamicPoint, basically, in a nutshell, is we create apps on top of Office 365, right? So here is us creating products within the Office 365 framework. And, you know, for people who are not familiar with that concept, they just think of Office 365 as being able to, you know, get Word or maybe PowerPoint or Outlook and things like that. But there's actually a lot more to Office 365, including a whole app development network where we live, you know, where our products reside. And for people who aren't familiar with it, I sort of draw the analogy as it's very similar to deploying an app to your mobile phone. I'm sure we've all added an app to our mobile phone from the App Store and ask us these questions. Can I use your camera and your location and send you notifications and all this stuff that we probably don't read? We just say yes to, but that is the app using the framework. And obviously the framework in that case is something like an iPhone or an Android. And we are taking that same approach, but from a business app perspective and using the Office 365 framework. So that is a little bit about us. We've been around before Office 365 existed. So we've sort of grown up from being a custom development company to doing SharePoint on-farm solutions. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, we rewrote all of our applications for the Office 365 framework. So all of what you're about to see is using the latest and greatest technology. It's nothing archaic. It's been around for decades or anything. So that's a little history on us. Our product portfolio basically consists of 3 products. We have a portal product, which enables a customer, vendor, and employee portal. We have an expense automation app, but really we're going to ignore all of those today and focus on this one. And this one is our AP invoice automation product. And the scope of this application is really everything from an invoice coming in from a vendor, regardless of how I receive it, the workflow associated to it using optical character recognition or OCR, and then the AP management aspect, and that includes such things as PO matching or assigning dimensions and accounts from Business Central. And then ultimately the ERP integration, right? This invoice is going to go through a workflow. It's going to be reviewed. It's going to be integrated as a purchase invoice to BC such that it could be paid and posted. So that's our scope of today and the product that we'll be featuring, but we're also going to cover a lot of Office 365 functionality as well. So the good news is, if you're not interested in our product, a lot of what you could do today is just using generally what our customers already own, because it is all Office 365 based. So our product approach, as I mentioned, we are based on Office 365, and it's okay. What does that mean? How are you integrating with the various suite of products, and how are you living within that ecosystem? And, from a nutshell, to hit it from a very high level, our product is deployed to SharePoint. So our app here, which is providing obviously the invoice automation functionality, integration with Business Central, is being deployed to SharePoint. And SharePoint is really serving as the framework for document storage. All the data of the app is stored in SharePoint. It's providing the security, if you have two-factor authentication enabled, all those other things, as well as just the look and feel. So it's really the dashboard, if you will, or the collaboration site for invoice automation. Invoices typically need to be reviewed, right? And they need to be reviewed using a workflow tool. And for that, Microsoft gives us an application by the name of Power Automate that we're going to use to route this invoice for review and approval. Even if invoices don't need to be quote unquote approved, let's say they're for a purchase order and I want to auto approve them if they match an invoice or an invoice matches a PO, you can still leverage that framework or that workflow for the business automation and the processing rules. So we'll look at using Power Automate. The other guys you see here, Power Apps and Forms. These come in generally together or in an effort to enable an invoice to be submitted using a different method. And what I mean by a different method is, say, like a check request. An invoice goes to someone within my organization and they need to submit it, but I don't want them just sending it to AP. I want them to submit a form or go through a more regiment process by which they'll use to submit that invoice to me. And that's where these tools come into play, and I'll showcase some of their uses as well that could be used for invoice automation. And then the last but not least, the reporting tool of choice from a Power BI perspective, from an Office 365 perspective is Power BI. And that, of course, will be showcasing some of the analytics that you could do now that all of this data is within your SharePoint tenant. So that just gives you a little lay of the land, right? Seeing Office 365 based sounds a little cliche-ish, so that's really the detail. And I'll show you each of those and how they're working together as we go through it today. So today we're going to be going through a process, right? And the process is going to be that of invoice automation. And generally speaking, that is 3 major steps that I like to say. The first step is the one you see over here, and this is this invoice coming into the system, or what I'm calling invoice receipt. Invoice receipt for us means that it is ultimately going to come into a library. And if you're familiar with SharePoint libraries, Microsoft provides, probably no joke, a dozen ways that I could get a document into that library. I could map it, as to a scanner. I could save it as a shared drive. I could do all kinds of different things. But really, when it comes to invoice automation, we see some fairly standard ones. The ability to email it, and emailing it to a shared AP inbox, which will ultimately land the invoice in this library. As I mentioned, a check request. In other words, people within the organization are wanting to submit invoices, and I just don't want them sending them to me. I want them to have a more formal process for entering those invoices and submitting them. Maybe I have people in the field, right, who are taking pictures of invoices and uploading them. Maybe I want to give my vendors a portal to upload an invoice. If I do receive a paper one in this day and age, you can most certainly scan it to that library, et cetera. So that's the first step that we're going to go through today, is how I could use all these various tools to offer flexibility in getting invoices ultimately into this library. And you can think of this library as being almost like our queuing mechanism or our garbage disposal, whatever we want to call it. Everything that lands in this library we're going to process, regardless of how it gets in there, right? So even if I drag and drop it into that library, we're going to pick it up and we're going to start processing all those invoices. And that includes using OCR to recognize all of the data, as well as use of our app for the financial aspect, the PO matching, the assignment of accounts and dimensions, the workflow integration with Power Automate. So that's obviously a pretty big step there, processing. And then the third and final step is that's going to be brought into the ERP system for processing and payment, right? Or posting and payment. So those are the steps we're about to go through today. I'll sort of beat each of them to death, and then, we'll come back and refer to where we are in the steps as I'm going through it. Unfortunately, today I'm the only person on the call, right? So I have to be everyone, and we're going to cover several personas as we're going through this, right? Like who's involved in invoice automation. First and foremost, there's the vendors or the contractors, whoever it is that, or even employees sometimes, people trying to submit invoices and they're trying to get paid, right? So that's sort of the first person, if you will, who cares about this process because they're the person who's actually giving me the invoice, which is the whole trigger for this process anyway. And their main concern is easy use, right? They don't really, quote unquote, care what's going on internally. They just want to get paid timely and make it simple on me. The second persona here is accounts payable. They are sort of the managers of this entire process. They're managing all the invoices. Maybe they're coding them and matching them to POs. Their main concern is efficiency. I have a lot of invoices to get through. How quickly can I get through them in a timely fashion? And then lastly, if I'm doing invoice approvals, right, and routing things for review and approval, I probably need to assign those tasks to managers, and managers need to review these, and their whole goal is, hey, how quickly can I get this done, right? Productivity, I'm doing my day job, approving invoices is not my main concern in life, and I want to quickly get through this so I can move on and get back to whatever I am working on. So I'm going to be, unfortunately, all of these today, so I'll try to highlight who I'm, pretending to be as we go through it. All right. So I think that's enough of an introduction, and now we could start looking at what it is that we're talking about. So I'm going to go to my demo site, and as you could probably tell for those on the phone who are familiar, this is nothing more than an Office 365 SharePoint site. You can tell from my URL. It's just an Office 365 SharePoint site. The only quote unquote difference about the site versus any other is our app has been deployed. So if you go to site contents, and you can see our app is there. So if you're not familiar with it, you could upload an app to a site, and that's basically how our product works or how it gets deployed. So let's go back to the site. Now, this is laid out, generally speaking, following those 3 steps that I just talked about, right? So this is invoices coming into the system, or step 1. This is my processing queue, or step 2. This is those that have already integrated, or just a link to business schedule, or step 3. And then if I scroll down here, I got some fancy Power BI reports just showing the data that's in the system and looking at graphs based on aging as well as unapproved invoices by vendor total. So people ask me, can I make this, does it have to look this way? Absolutely not, right? I can make this site look however I want. I just sort of logically lay it out based on the steps that I'm about to walk you through. But this is where the app lives. It is the SharePoint site. It is the primary concern or the portal to see all the invoices for the accounts payable department. But lo and behold, everyone could use this, and I'll show you a little bit later when we get into permissions. If you want to give this site access to like managers so they could see the status of invoices, you can most certainly do that as well. Okay. Enough talking about that. Let's start processing invoices. So the first step here is this library. And as I promised, all of our invoices are going to come into the library. And as you can see, this library is not at all exciting. It's just a blank library with some columns. And I could upload an invoice here, right? So I could obviously upload an invoice. I could create a new one. But we are going to start showing, that's probably not how I'm going to receive these invoices from vendors. The most likely way I'm going to get them, seems to be the most popular, is they're going to email them to me. So I'm going to go over here and bring up an email, and I'm going to pretend to be a vendor. As I mentioned, I have to be everyone here. And I'm going to be a vendor, and I'm going to send this invoice to ap@dynamicpoint.com, which happens to be my accounts payable queue, or inbox, I should say. And I have a fancy invoice here from the Acme Corporation, and we're going to submit it for payment. And what you're going to see here is when I hit send there, it's going to be routed and saved to this library. As soon as it is saved to this library, like every invoice that gets to this library, it's going to kick off an OCR process. And that OCR process is going to get the data for all of the blank columns that you see here. It's going to call that OCR process, and that process is going to return all the data that I have defined that I'm interested in getting from invoices. So you can see I can refresh my screen. Voila, there's my invoice. And if I hit refresh again, hopefully, sometimes it'll take a second or two, you'll see those data columns populate with the results of OCR. Now, for sake of full disclosure, no one is hanging out waiting for this to happen, right? This is me showing you how it works such that you could understand how it works. And then when I start showing you the flexible options, you can say, oh, okay, I get it, right? Like I could really do all kinds of invoice submissions. It doesn't matter. I could, do fax, I could do scan, I could do uploads, however I want to get it in there, I can, and DynamicPoint will process it. So like I said, sometimes OCR takes 30 seconds and other times I'm sort of, oh, there you go. I'm sitting here refreshing like a madman, but you can see OCR returned all the results of the invoice. So not only do I have the attachment, I've now extrapolated all the important metadata from the invoice, right? So all the key information that I wanted to obtain has been returned from OCR. And it's gone, right? And it moved on to that next step. So as I mentioned, this is sort of our garbage collector, right? However I throw an invoice into this library, it's going to be processed by our application and what we've configured. So let's look through different ways, right? So that was somewhat exciting. That was an invoice, right? But I can do, let's do a check request, right? So let's pretend that I am receiving invoices to more managers in the company as opposed to them going to accounts payable. And the people within the organization then want to turn around and submit this to accounts payable. But I don't want them just emailing it to me because, that's not the best control mechanism. They could write anything on the email. They could send me a picture of their cat. I mean, they could do whatever they want, but I want to have something a little bit more regiment, right? I want them to submit the vendor name, the email of the vendor. I want them to, specify which cost center this purchase is for. I want them to put the invoice ID for me, invoice amount, and then upload the invoice. So I'll go ahead and pick that invoice out here and upload it. I left invoice on. Okay, so they're going to go ahead and submit this. And people ask, what's the difference between this and an email? Well, as you could tell, it's a little bit more controlled, right? I could collect more data and require the submitter to specify data fields that may be used down the road for such things as not only in assigning accounts, but maybe workflow and things like that. So I could capture more of the critical information that's going to automate the process down the road. And if I go to my library, you're going to see that invoice again came into that same spot. And if I sit here and refresh for a second, it's gone, right? So again, that was using a Microsoft form. I don't know if I actually showed you, but it says powered by forms all over it, and saving that same invoice to that library, but this time enabling it through a check request form. So let's keep that going, right? Let's say that I want to do that same thing, but I don't want internal people to do that. I want my vendors to submit it, and I'm tired of them emailing me, and I want to put a form on my website. We happen to have a WordPress website. WordPress has plugins, of course, for Office 365 libraries, and voila, I have a form. Same idea, but as you can see, it's branded for our website. It's public, right? Where a form can be restricted by a user. And then I could go in here and again, upload my invoice. The portal site. And then they could submit it there. As you probably guessed, I don't want to put anyone to sleep here, but it's going to go into that library and be processed. So we could keep going. Moving on, other methods. So we did check request, we did drag and drop. All right, we talked about drag and drop. We talked about the website form, mobile. Let's do that really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my phone over. So sometimes invoices are to be, taken a picture of, or people don't have a scanner, or people are out on the field and they don't want to be bothered with, going back to an office and scanning an invoice, or it's still being received on paper. So what I have here is the OneDrive app. And I could go to my library and take a simple picture. As you can see, it's cropping it and cleaning it up a little bit using the OneDrive app. And I could confirm it. And as you probably guessed, this is going to go right into that library, save it. I have the ability here to specify some of the metadata, so I could overwrite the invoice number and do all this other stuff if I want to, or I could just let OCR take care of it, which is probably more realistic. And then I could hit save, and it goes right to that library. So that was an easy upload. Again, that was just using the OneDrive app, but sometimes I want to collect a little bit more data, and I could use a Power App to do that. What a Power App gives you is, again, it's sort of like a check request. It gives me the ability to specify required fields and give it a little bit more of a structured upload process. So this happened to be developed for one of our customers that was a farm. And believe it or not, people were going around in their, truck or whatever, picking up things like fertilizer and whatever you need to grow crops, right? And they wanted people to basically select, if you look at my fields here, they're all farm related, right? Select the crop and the farm that they worked on, the location. And by doing this, they were actually coding it to Business Central dimensions, right? So by me specifying all this information, I think I'm just submitting an invoice, but I'm actually doing all the heavy lifting of the accounting side. And again, I could take a picture and upload it. And again, not to be a broken record, that's going to go into the library and it will be processed. So we sold this as being Teams focused, and we should go look at that from Teams too. Teams, I could hook up an invoice library. If I wanted to give someone the ability to upload this invoice right here, why not? I absolutely could, right? So I could go in here, upload my invoice, and again, it's going to go in that same library. In fact, if I click SharePoint here, you would see it open up, and I would see it sitting directly in that library. Same thing is going to happen to it. OCR is going to be processed, and it's going to be brought into our app for processing. So I think we've probably exhausted, oops, wrong slide. I think we probably exhausted all of the ones that I wanted to show you so far in this step one. So as I mentioned, we'd come back and refer to this. We've done email, we did check requests, we did mobile upload, we did a portal, all these ways for you to get an invoice into the system. And as I mentioned, that kicked off OCR, right? And OCR is using a cloud-based OCR tool that's integrated with that library to gather all of that information and save it right back to columns. So then I could use it for the second step, which is the processing of this invoice. So now we're going to make our way on to step two, and we're going to start looking at these invoices and figure out what we need to do to process them, route them for review and approval, and then ultimately get them into the accounting system. All right, let's get back out of here. And we'll go to my home page, which is here. Close out some of these tabs so I don't get too confused. Okay, so we were on this first step, incoming invoices, and now we're going to look at the second step, the processing queue, right? And this is the first time you're going to actually see our application at work now. So for those of you, for be completely honest, all of what I showed you thus far really doesn't require an app. It's just using Office 365 technology. So if all of that would provide automation to your current manual process, it's probably all available to you even without an application. All right, so here's our app. Our app is the management dashboard of all these invoices. As you can see, I have various fields here. I have statuses, I have vendor assignment, I have amounts. I could expand each of these and sort of look at the detail. And I'll go through these really quick just to show you what they are. But basically what's going on here is OCR gave me some stuff, right? It gave me some fields, and that all got mapped to the various assignment columns. So it gave me a date, it gave me an invoice number, it gave me amount. The invoice was submitted from an email, and we used that email to assign a vendor. So in my case, I have it mapped to the Fabricam vendor using that domain, so it was auto-assigned. Everything's coming in here in this auto-created status, and as you can see, I've actually defaulted accounts and dimensions using a concept of vendor templates in the system. And basically what a template does is it just defaults line items. So I could go change any of these allocations. If I change any of these, you can see the account's going to be updated based on that. And this is actually mapped to a dimension of which, of course, I could change. I could add new allocations. I could put different percentages, etc. Or I could just say, heck with it. I want to assign a brand new template and then update that as well. So this would be considered a non-PO invoice. A PO invoice is going to bring in those line items directly from Business Central. So the match process automatically adds these line items for me, but I'll show you how it's done manually so you can get the the idea of it, but it would have recognized that PO number and brought in the match items. And those match items could either be from a three-way match or a two-way match, depending on if you're doing receiving within Business Central. So the line item idea is the same, of course, but they're coming from a different location, and that is directly querying Business Central. Another thing you'll notice here is we're getting a little warning message saying, hey, this already exists. And what that means is we're basically performing validation on these line items, querying the information in Business Central to see if it's unique, because we don't want to pay the same vendor twice, right? So they keep submitting us the same invoice. We most certainly don't want to pay them more than once. So we'd validate that for duplicate check. If I simply update it, we'll requery Business Central, and you can see the error message is now gone. So this is, again, the sort of dashboard. I have an ability to review all of this information. I could look at the invoice. I could obviously look at the details and then choose to submit it. Submitting it is going to kick off the workflow. People ask, do I have to do the review? No, you don't. You can automatically kick off the submission as that invoice comes in. But usually we see, from implementations that we've done, that accounts payable sort of likes this gatekeeper opportunity to come in here and validate that everything looks good, maybe make some changes and adjustment, and then submit it. If I submit it, you can see it's going to go under review. Under review means we've kicked off the workflow process. The workflow process is going to use a Power Automate workflow to automate this for review and approval. So if I go to the audit log right here, you can see it's kicked off the workflow and it's pending a DynamicPoint demo account. Before we go to the review, again, we wanted to focus on Teams today. So everything you see here, I've actually just opened it in my browser, but SharePoint sites I could open in Teams, right? Teams is very SharePoint integrated. So if I click on my invoice processing tab here within my team, you're going to see I have that same look and feel. So, even accounts payable could do everything I've just showed you here within Teams. I could edit those invoices, update them, and do all of the, queue management tasks, if you will, within Teams. All right, so when I left that one, I kicked it off, right? And I kicked it off for review. And my review is going to use a department hierarchy, right? And that is, again, going to be driven using this Power Automate workflow, but it's leveraging the departments and the dollar amounts to route it for approval. So now I have to pretend to be a manager, right? And my manager is going to get all kinds of notifications or different ways to review and approve this. So here, if I open up my email, I could see I have a new invoice assigned to me, and I could click on this invoice and I could look at it, of course. I could look at some of the metadata. On the notification here, these fields are all configurable, so you could add more data here, and I could approve or reject it. You can see there's also a link that gives me the ability to edit it. What that's reserved for is sometimes managers have to edit the invoice as it's actually going through a workflow process. So they have to go in here and maybe change PO matching or change allocation items or assign departments and stuff like that. All right, so that was one way to do it. That was an email. Of course, I'm going to be able to do that from Teams, right? Because here I have my feed. And on my feed, I have a new request. And on that new request, I have my invoice as well as an ability to drill back into it and approve or reject it. Teams also has a Power Automate app. It's called Approvals. It's a little bit different look and feel than the activity feed because I could see them all in one place. Right, so here's all my invoices and the ones I've approved and whatever else. So it's the same quote unquote idea as the activity feed, but maybe a little bit different because I could see them all and it's not mixed in with other activities. Phone, if I want to approve it from a mobile device, sure enough, there is a Power Automate app. I could look at it. I could go to my approvals and review it from there. So oops, let's go ahead and skip that. Let's look at my activity. And same idea, right? Anything here I could look at, click on the link, approve or reject it directly from the mobile app, as well as put in a comment. So all just different ways of doing the same thing. Okay, let's keep it moving. We'll go back here. We're gonna say this looks great. This is good. Submit. All right. To keep things moving, and my workflow is pretty doggone simple. I only have a single tiered. It is based on dollar threshold, but my dollar threshold was super low, so it's only going to go to one person for review. Obviously, you could have much more complex workflows, but I am trying to keep this going as not to put everyone to sleep. So let's keep it moving. And once you've done one workflow step, you sort of seen them all because they're very similar. All right, I got a notification that it was approved, so that's great. If I were to go back here and refresh my screen, you can see my invoice is actually gone, and it's not really gone, it's just being filtered out. So if I clear my filter here, you could see that I filtered out what we call submitted, which basically means it's already gone through the workflow and it's integrated with Business Central. But let's go look at a few things really quick. Let's look at the audit log. Audit log has each step in the workflow and who took action on it, and I could see the DynamicPoint demo account approved it. I could look at the notes. I could say, hey, here's all the reviewer notes, which are, if I approve it, it's mildly entertaining, I guess. But if I reject it, this is where I would put the details of why I rejected this invoice. As I mentioned, we are using a permission model that each person who is involved in the invoice process can have access to the invoices that they are involved in or applicable to them. So what that means is this dashboard is basically dynamic. So anyone could come in here. It doesn't just have to be accounts payable and see the invoices that they're part of either the workflow or create them, but are somehow involved. So there are permissions on it. We do have the ability to attach documentation. I didn't show you that, so I don't have any attachments. And then the last tab here is a transaction that now exists in Business Central. So let's go show you. Let's go open up Business Central. And I just created a purchase invoice because it was for a non-PO invoice. And I will go to my purchase invoices, scroll all the way to the bottom. We do integrate with other ERPs, by the way, but Business Central is our focus for today's conversation. And if I go look at this number here that says 107440, that should match this guy, which looks like it does. I could click on this guy. It opens up that purchase invoice, so I could see that has been integrated and created automatically, as well as I have a link to that attachment that I could open. And if you guys are familiar, you could also modify this screen to put the links back on it, and we could link to it directly using that links fact box. So those are options as well. But now it's ready. The invoice has been integrated. We called the web services of this page. We passed all the information from the product, so now it could be posted and paid and just processed like a normal invoice. So let's go ahead and go back to our diagram really quick. So let's see, let's make sure we went through everything correctly. We went through the invoice receipt. We showed you how to receive it in the different fashions. We looked at the processing and how that could be done. Each of these, we showed the integration with Teams, the accounting integration. We called the web services of Business Central and brought that invoice directly in there. So we'll skip those because we already did it. So what we're trying to do here, right, is using this platform, you could offer a lot of functionality, hopefully for a cheaper price, right? That's why we do things, is it's going to be more efficient. And if you look at the building blocks of invoice automation, there's the ERP integration, the invoice repository, OCR, workflow, all of these components, if you will, that make a invoice automation solution. And if you look at what we just demonstrated, so much of that is coming from Office 365, right? So if you already have that in-house, and you're already paying for it, of course, why not use it to automate this process? It's going to provide gobs of functionality. You're already going to have the user familiarness to those tools. And what we are adding to it is an app within that ecosystem that basically handles the missing part, right? The ERP integration. We have a concept of vendor templates for account assignment. We have PO matching and the sort of heavy lifting of the business process, if you will, or the financial aspect. But all the rest of it is coming from Office 365.
Great. Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
We're going to open up the floor to some questions. So if you have any, please enter them in the chat and we'll read those out. I have others that have come in, and the first one is, where is all the data stored?
Okay. I will answer that and show it to you. This card. So all of the data, as I mentioned, is stored in SharePoint, right? So this is obviously our app and it's reading all the information. I have a link right here where it's taking me actually to that list in SharePoint. And as you can see, this is the raw list. So most people want to interact with this, but this is where all the information is stored. It is all in your Office 365 tenant. I could, export it to Excel. I could use Power BI and do reports on this. So it is absolutely all within your Office 365 tenant. It's not, stored in our cloud or anything like that. It's all residing in your subscription.
Oh, that's great. The next question that's come through is what licenses are required for this solution to work?
Okay. Also good one. So for the licenses, if you were just to do a quick Google, right, just to show you what the normal average bear gets with Office 365. So if I go to Office 365, enterprise licensing plans, and this, most people seem to be on an enterprise plan. And if you look at, all these little check boxes, what we're really using here is Teams. So all of those include that, of course. Exchange, SharePoint, Power Automate. And generally speaking, if you're on an Office 365 plan, you already own all these tools, right? There's all these apps that you get that, a lot of people are not using. And but Microsoft makes it hard to not buy all of them, right? Because with your subscription for whatever it is, $10 a month, you're already getting all those products. So the answer to the question is chances are you already have it because most of them are already included. But it entails SharePoint, which comes with Office 365, Power Automate, and then I used Outlook for submission, so email.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one other question that's come through. How does your solution securely connect to my ERP application?
That's a good one too. Okay, so we use a cloud-based app, right? And in the world of Business Central, there's sort of this cool feature that I could publish any page as a web service, right? And that's exactly what we're doing. We're interfacing with invoices and vendors, and we're using these pages that can be accessed via a URL, right? So here is the URL that obviously is secure. But if I go look, every page within Business Central can communicate with these URLs. So we are authenticating to these URLs, and they're obviously all using encryption, right? They're all using SSL. If you look at it, it says HTTPS. But using this OData URL, if I were to go into configuration of the product, you would actually see these URLs specified. So that's how we're communicating with Business Central. For those people who are on an on-premise solution, whether it be Dynamics Nav or GP or whatever else, Microsoft gives us another tool called a hybrid connection. So if I go to Azure hybrid connection, it's going to bring up this fancy little diagram here that shows you how you could use these to connect from an Azure app service, which our product is, to on-premise resources. So if you are using something that's still installed on premise, this gives us the connectivity without having to make it public. If you're using Business Central, those are already public. Oops, I closed the web service page, but those are already public, and then we just communicate using secure connections to that.
Okay, great. We have another one, another question that's come through the chat. What if we have an invoice span over multiple pages? On mobile, can we scan each page and get the consolidated data in one list in SharePoint?
So there's several scenarios, right? One is an invoice over multiple pages, and that's pretty easy, right? In fact, I could show you a trick. So if you go to our website, dynamicpoint.com, and you go to invoice automation, and you scroll all the way to the bottom here, you will see how well does OCR work. And here you'll find a link that you could test it out. So you could go ahead and upload an invoice, and what it'll do is call the OCR tool and give me the results. So let's go ahead and pick we'll pick this guy. And it's going to process the file. And this is sort of just a summary, by the way, on this visualized data of the results of OCR. But if I go to this tab, it's nearly not as pretty, but it shows you all of the data that we were able to extract and the tags associated to it. So if this invoice is multiple pages, that works fine. The other scenario, which is a little bit more tricky, is if I have multiple invoices in a single PDF. That has to be split. And OCR could do that. It just needs a trigger for splitting it, such as the invoice number only appears on whatever the first page, or at the bottom it'll say page 1 of 5, or something like that we could use to automatically split it. So multi-page invoices, you could go ahead and upload that and try it right here, and that's fine. It's easy, pretty basic, but multiple invoices in a single PDF have to be split. And for OCO to do that, you need some type of trigger saying this is a new invoice, whether it be a header, or an invoice number, or page 1 of 3, or whatever, that we could read and split it.
All right, great. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So if anybody has any other questions that might come up, or you'd like to book a meeting or a one-on-one demo, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. My contact information is up on the screen. And for more information about Sabre, you can visit us at sabrelimited.com. And I want to thank everyone who attended, and we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time, and thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for watching our videos. Please follow our channel by clicking here to stay up to date with the latest content, or click here for more great videos. Don't forget to visit our website at sabrelimited.com. We look forward to seeing you next time.